When talking about my home country, Mary Todd Lincoln, First Lady to Abraham Lincoln, once said, "Beautiful, glorious Scotland has spoilt me for every other country." I feel like that's a sentiment Switch-owning shmup players may sympathise with when it comes to the second half of 2021 and everything since. When you have just received Eschatos, Death Smiles, Cotton Rock and Roll, Dodonpachi, Mushihime-sama, it's hard to get too excited for anything that's not equally as amazing. And I think that partially explains the somewhat muted response to the initial release of Sol Cresta from Platinum Games, who were kind enough to recently supply me with a review copy. Now, something like Sol Cresta, a high-effort release from a large studio, is something many shmup fans have been asking for years, and the fact that it was Platinum, a studio responsible for some of the best character action games in recent years, who rose to the challenge, seemed like a match made in heaven, raising expectations for Sol Cresta to, in my opinion, some possibly unreasonably lofty heights. Now that the dust has settled, however, and very importantly, at least one patch has been applied to improve performance, I feel like Sol Cresta, while far from perfect, should be looked on as something with far more plus points than minus ones, and an overall very solid and highly innovative effort from a studio that, let's not forget, were making their first full foray into the genre. The mechanics of the game are both numerous and complex and centre around the action of docking your ship with others to make a larger ship, something continued from previous series entries Moon Cresta and Terra Cresta. While you start with just a single ship, you very quickly acquire two more with whom you can dock to form up into a larger and more powerful craft. With the press of a button, you can then undock and redock your three ships in various ways that affect gameplay, starting with simply choosing which ship is at the head of your formation. If it's the blue ship, you'll fire homing missiles, if it's the red ship, you'll get a wide shot, and if it's the yellow ship, you'll get a fairly powerful straight shot. Not only that, the ship that is in the middle will dictate which power shot is open to you, and for the duration of time you spend rearranging your formation, time will slow down, giving you an advantage when it comes to dodging, and all this, by the way, is just the absolute basics of the gameplay. Because if you hold down the docking button, this is where the real fun begins. Now you can rearrange your ships into a variety of shapes, in a fashion not 100% dissimilar to the wonderful 101, each of which unleashes its own special attack ranging from destructive angled lasers to rotating cutters flying off in all directions. These special formations, however, can only be unleashed after collecting the relevant formation chip for that stage, and collecting all the formations unlocks a special extra Phoenix formation, which is incredibly powerful but becomes progressively more difficult to attain as you move through the stages. As I'm sure you can imagine, these docking and formation options take a fair bit of getting used to, but the effort is well worth it as they introduce some really unique ways to play, offer up a ton of tactical options, and crucially, are just pretty damn fun to play about with. On top of all this, you also have a selection of command moves that allow you to shoot backwards, to the sides, or all around, with quick back and forths or rotations of your control stick. These, in my experience, were far easier to pull off using an arcade stick than when playing with a regular controller, and it's a good idea not to overlook them, as the all-around shot in particular can be really useful if you're able to pull it off when you're in a bit of a jam. There are also many colour-coded items such as rings or bonus-filled crates that require you to have the matching colour ship at the head of your formation, and some enemy ships also shield themselves with similarly colour-coded auras that need the right weapon to take down. A lot of these things are tied to scoring, and in general scoring is quite interesting. There's not really a single main hook to it, and instead there are a myriad of different ways to get your points tally up, meaning that there's always room for improvement. I will actually put a link to Platinum's own very helpful explanation of this in the description because, honestly, otherwise we would be here all day. The one thing I will say is use your formation shots. There's a nice loop where using formation shots allows you to power them back up more quickly, and keeping this going has, at least for me so far, been the key to hitting decent numbers. Now, like the enemies mentioned earlier, you too have a shield system, and the game is really pretty generous in this respect, with shield power-ups dropping relatively frequently, and even when you take a hit with no shield left, you only lose one craft at a time, and again, replacement drops are rarely too few and far between, even during boss fights. This makes Sol Cresta a great game for beginners, as does the fact it allows you to start from any stage previously reached. This in turn means the game can do away with continues, while still offering most players the chance to make their way to the end of the game. There are also multiple difficulty options, and I actually found the inclusion of the easier ones to be of great use here, as a way to get a handle on and experiment with the mechanics, as doing so straight away in normal is a bit of an ask when you're still trying to just work things out. Once you've got the hang of things, however, normal becomes much more fun and accessible, with this also being a nice and natural way to increase the game's longevity. Further extending the game's long-term appeal is the way the different modes open up. When you start, you have just an arcade mode with a local leaderboard. However, by achieving various goals outlined in an achievements menu, you earn points that help you unlock various extras ranging from caravan and high score modes, to online scoreboards, to a sound test. Achievements themselves are always welcome, and this edition is a nice gentle way to encourage anyone thinking beating the game once on super easy is them done with things, to keep coming back and explore properly. It's also worth noting that even outside of any provisions to increase replayability, Sol Cresta is just a straight up long ass game. Each stage is broken in two by a mid-boss, and honestly each half stage is probably not far off the length of a full stage in most arcade shmups. The way it's structured, with each stage being able to be approached individually though, means for most people, especially newer players, this probably won't be a problem, but if you are looking to hook up a complete 1cc run, you are going to need to strap yourself in for a long haul. So far so good, and for me, yeah, in terms of gameplay it is almost all good. However, the most notable problems here stem from presentation, and it's not just purely aesthetic issues. The visual problems do actually affect gameplay in a fairly serious way. Now, you have eyes, this is a video review, so you can probably already see that Sol Cresta isn't exactly a looker. I will say I think a lot of the comments on its ugliness are somewhat exaggerated, and I think you can kinda see what Platinum were going for here, which is a retro look combined with a more modern sheen, but basically it just hasn't really come off, with the backgrounds looking weird and kinda gloopy. Enemies fare significantly better, and there's a clear attempt here to mimic the source material of the older Cresta games, and that does come off quite well, especially in the opening part of each stage, where you cross a very 80s looking starfield with suitably matching throwback enemies. Bosses vary a lot, some are just kind of shapes, and on top of their uninspired appearance repeat as well. However, especially later in the game, you do get some very cool looking bosses that tally far more with the image a lot of us would have had in our heads of what a Platinum shmup might look like. So while the visuals may not be the prettiest or what we've been hoping to see from such a famously creative studio, I don't think they're hideous in terms of pure aesthetics. However, where they do fall down in a far more major way is in colour work and bullet or background differentiation, and this for me is far and away the game's biggest flaw. Far too many objects, far too often, are just simply not clearly delineated from the background. This could be orange enemy bullets on an orange lava background, it could be the barest indication, if any, regarding which objects you can collide with and which you can pass over, or it could be the barely noticeable aiming reticules telling you where falling rocks are going to strike, but basically it is all too often very poorly done, and a big surprise from a studio with the experience and usual, in my opinion, excellence of Platinum. This lack of visual clarity culminates in the final moments of the game when you undertake an escape sequence that should, on paper, be one of the most thrilling parts of the game, but ends up being an absolute nightmare until you've run it several times and basically just memorised how it goes. And what's strange is that while the in-game visuals leave a lot to be desired, the presentation in all other aspects is very good. The music is top notch, and if you've watched any trailers or footage of the game, you've probably already got the main theme worming its way into your ears. The menus, UI, intro sequence, etc., as well as the overall look of the play screen are all very professional too, with the game doing a nice job of keeping everything you need clear and readable when you switch to the more space-cramping Tatty mode. And speaking of Tatty mode, you may have heard the game performs better with the screen rotated. I can't confirm that, but the information comes from sources I trust, so I will assume it's true. What I will say though is that the patch must have addressed at least some of the performance issues people were experiencing immediately post-release, because I didn't personally find anything overly egregious, whether I was playing with an arcade stick on a rotated TV, or with Joy-Cons attached in handheld mode. That's not to say this game runs perfectly, it does have its little issues, but they are far from game-breaking. When it comes to summing this one up, I feel like the fact a bit of time has passed since it released has probably been quite beneficial. The game, I feel, is trying to mimic an older style, while adding a whole bunch of Platinum-style twists to proceedings. A lot of us maybe envisaged something faster paced, more adrenaline fueled, but really that's on us. When it was announced this was going to be a successor to the Cresta series, we really should have known it was going to follow at least some of those older conventions, and maybe adjusted our expectations accordingly. Going in with a more concrete idea of what I was getting, I was very pleasantly surprised by Sol Cresta, and I found the main thing, the gameplay, to be really refreshing, and offering something interesting and tactical, while crucially still remaining a lot straight up fun. The visuals may not be as polished as we'd have liked, and some of the visibility issues that have snuck in are really quite puzzling, but the rest of the presentation is great, and all the game modes, achievements and scoring options mean that despite the higher than usual price, there is still some serious bang for your buck with this one. I would give Sol Cresta an 8 out of 10, and it's a very strong 8 at that. I really do hope the Neo Arcade line this is supposedly the beginning of does continue, as for me, this is a great start and hugely impressive for a first go at the genre, and I would love to see what Platinum might do now they've got a bit more experience and feedback. Do let us know your thoughts if you have been playing this. I have the physical version with the Dramatic Mode DLC pre-ordered, so I will be really interested to hear thoughts on what the story mode adds if anyone has picked that up already. As ever, thank you very much for watching, and hope to see you next time. Cheers.